Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are taking a trip back to the 60s and 70s with a retro-inspired winter coat. This summer, while I was doing a bit of retail therapy online, I ordered a gorgeous 100% wool Scottish tartan blanket from one of my favorite shops in Edinburgh, which I will link in the description below. And when I received it, all I could think about was turning this really warm and beautiful blanket into a fabulous winter coat. And so that is what we are going to be doing today. Now, unfortunately, I did not have a vintage pattern that I felt would be appropriate for this particular material, but I was able to find a Butterick pattern that I thought would have a lovely shape to it and could very easily lend itself to that 1960s, 1970s feel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our video today and get started on this really great 1960s inspired winter coat.
All right, guys, here is our absolutely gorgeous Scottish wool blanket. It is in the Heritage of Scotland tartan. And here is our lovely coat pattern. It is a modern pattern, which I do have a vintage coat pattern that I considered making. However, it was a bit more of a delicate pattern and really called for coat wool, which is a bit thinner. And I really do want to try and make a lovely coat out of this amazing blanket because I think it will be really beautiful and I think it will be ridiculously warm. But as you can see, it is going to be quite a bit thicker than wool coating material. So it is a heritage tweed blanket, which I'm really excited about. It's real wool, and I am getting pretty darn excited about getting started on this project. But first, before I do anything else, I'm going to have to do what is probably going to be the most difficult part about this entire project, and that is double check my measurements, which really no woman wants to do, but I need to do it to make sure that I'm making the correct size coat. So off I go, and then we can get started on. All right, I have all of my pattern pieces cut out, and I've also got them folded along the petite lines you can see here and just gently pinned. I did not want to cut them and retape these pieces in the event that I ever wanted to use this pattern again, maybe for someone taller than myself. However, I am pretty short at about 5'2", 5'3". Most patterns are a bit long for me, so I did go ahead and take those areas up. And then truly after I'm done, I may still need to cut a little bit off the bottom, but this will at least give us a start. Our next step is going to be seeing if we have enough material. There are actually quite a few pieces for this pattern, so it might be close, but we're going to see if we can do it. Okay, it's taken a bit of finagling, but I think I've got the pattern laid out, and I think I will have enough fabric in this blanket to complete the outer coat with the pattern lining up fairly well along the notched edges of the pattern. Okay guys, I have all of the pieces of our Scottish tartan blanket cut out for our coat pattern. I did my best to try and line up where some of the pattern pieces would be coming together. I don't know how successful I was, but I at least have the tartan pattern all going in the same direction, so we'll see how that goes. The other thing I think I will do with this coat is I'm going to break out my old Singer sewing machine. This is from the 60s or 70s, and it is a workhorse. It is heavy duty, it is solid, and I've used it for so many projects over the last 20 years that are really heavy duty, that I feel more confident using it for this particular project, going through multiple layers of blanket material. So let's get this little one, or big one, out of the case, get it set up, and see if we can't start getting some of these pieces put together so that we can start getting our jacket or our beautiful winter coat put together. I am working on the pocket insertion for the front of the jacket, and I have the pockets for both sides pinned in place. You'll notice I have the front of the fabric for the pocket facing the front of the fabric for my jacket, and that is because once we've stitched along this line here, we're going to be flipping these pockets inside out like this, and then we will sew the pocket closed and stitch along the side, connecting the two pieces of the jacket, leaving the two correct sides of the pocket together in where your hands are going to be. It's something that I feel like kind of can be confusing when you are first starting out pattern making and trying to do pockets. It seems wrong when you're putting everything together, knowing it's going to flip, but you want the correct sides facing your material so that when you flip them and turn them inside out, the correct side will be where you want to be touching and where you want to see. All right, guys, we're back. Last night I finished off and stopped when I had put together all of the main body pieces of the jacket, got it put onto my dress form mannequin, and unfortunately noticed that it's quite a bit too big, despite having measured myself 3 times to make sure that I was choosing the correct size according to the pattern, which is a little disappointing about this pattern because so far I think the pattern itself is very beautiful. I like the lines of the jacket, I like how it's fitting the mannequin so far, but the fact that according to the pattern itself, this size should fit me perfectly, and it is about 2 to 4 inches on the sides. And I'm not sure if you can see, I've gathered up pieces in the back as well, probably taken out another 2 inches out of the back. So a little lesson learned for this particular one. This is a Butterick pattern. Let me just grab it here. It's the Butterick B6497. And I would say if you're making this, maybe size down a little bit, because this is pretty dramatic. One thing that I did have come together yesterday that I was very happy about is the lines of the pattern matching it pretty well. I did not worry about the side seams matching nicely just because I had very limited fabric and material to work with, and I knew that getting these seams perfectly wasn't going to happen. So instead I focused on making sure that the main panel of the back and the 2 side panels lined up pretty well, and I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, as well as the main panel of the front and the side pieces, which also turned out pretty well. Now, the actual blocks aren't perfect, but I felt like these white lines that ran through were going to be more apparent, and I felt that these ones were the ones that I really wanted to try and make sure lined up well, and they have, so yay! I'm very happy about that. So tonight, I need to get the sleeves put together and hopefully put on, and the collar. And then I also need to figure out how I would like to line this front piece, whether I want to simply flip a hem here along the side or if I want to actually line it, which is how the pattern was written. Now the pattern is written so that you're actually cutting 2 of these pieces out, both for the layer that tucks in as well as the layer that goes over. But because I was both limited on the quantity of the fabric as well as because of the actual thickness of the fabric as well, I didn't really want to do that because I didn't want to create a ton of bulk. So I do have a navy blue fabric that's very thin and simple and could be a nice lining material, and I may choose to do that. I also may simply choose to flip a hem because this is a lovely warm jacket as it is, because it is made out of a Scottish wool and it is technically a blanket. So as I go along, I'll figure out how I want to do that. As for the collar, the technique I am most familiar with in terms of putting collars in, and since I have kind of a limited time to do this, I think I'm going to go with what I know instead of trying to figure out new directions, is the sandwich technique. which is to say I would lay the collar down here and then lay a lining piece down on top of it, sandwiching the collar between the lining and the coat. Stitch along the entire top collar portion and then flip the lining inside out, which will effectively pull the collar up so that it creates a slight raised edge, but allows the collar to lay flat and nice across the front of the jacket. But then on the inside, it's going to hide all of those raw edges with that lining. I'm going to get started, but I think first things first, before I can really even get started on the sleeves confidently, is I think I'm going to have to take in this jacket on both the sides and then decide how I want to take in the back, whether I want to take in this back center seam or if I want to take in on the sides. I had considered simply taking in the center seam, as this jacket does call in the shorter version for a center seam along the back, so it wouldn't be out of character for this pattern. However, I kind of liked that I randomly ended up with this long white stripe down the back, almost like it's the spine. And so I've been hesitant about taking the material out there simply because I will lose that. So I will have to decide how I feel about it, if I think this is a nice look or if I think it's distracting and subsequently I want to just go ahead and take a center seam out. All right, I've taken the sides in as well as taken the back in a bit. I think the larger black buttons are going to work best. But overall, I'm happy with how the alterations have gone. I tried to leave all of the fullness in the hips and the bottom of the jacket and only take things in along the sides and the back in the upper torso portion to give it a lovely fitted feel, and I think so far it's working pretty well.
Okay guys, wrap up time. I am absolutely in love with my new wool Scottish tartan jacket. I think it's fabulously 1960s retro chic. I have seen actually right now on Blackout to Vintage a ton of gorgeous jackets, very similar with the beautiful plaids and beautiful tartans that were actually made in the 60s, and so I'm thrilled that this kind of came up and I finished it around the same time that I'm seeing those beautiful pictures come from that shop. Overall, with this pattern, I am very pleased. I'm pleased with the front lines. I love the fur color. I think the back lines of the jacket turned out very nice. And despite the fact that I was working with a very limited fabric, I think the lines in the particular pattern actually did turn out pretty darn well. It's wonderfully warm. I've already had a chance to wear it all over town, and I've been very pleased because it's been very, very cold here. So it's been a real godsend since my other winter coat that used to be for dress, it just doesn't fit me anymore. Something that I did notice with this particular pattern, and I've noticed with previous Butterick patterns, is I do tend to need to make alterations, and I need to size down the top portion in order to fit properly for me. As my hip measurements tend to be a little bit larger, it tends to push the sizing up on patterns for me, and then I do need to size down on the upper portions. And in a pattern like this, where it's one long piece versus a separate top portion and then a separate skirt, it does mean a little bit of extra finagling. I am very, very happy with the fact that the alterations that needed to be made were very, very simple in this particular one, so I was happy about that. But in the future, I would know to size down the top portion and just to be prepared for that. The other thing that I wasn't 100% pleased with in this particular pattern is the pattern calls for the pockets to be here in this front seam, and I don't really love it. I really prefer my pockets to be in the side seams, like the far side seams. And while in this pattern they would have been a little bit further back, I still think I would have preferred it, and should I make the jacket again, I think I would move the pockets back to these back seams instead, simply because when I noticed when I put things in these front pockets, it tends to pull on the front of the jacket, and it's not terribly flattering. The other thing that I think I would consider with this jacket, and I think I may even consider still, is adding a belt to it. As I noticed in the 60s and 70s, many of the tartan, tweed, plaid jackets that were out there in a similar shape to this, many of them had a nice big thick belt, and I think that this jacket would work well with that style. The fact that I did leave the bulk of the jacket in the lower half despite nipping the sides in does make this a little bit wide in the hips, but I think it will work really well with wider, bigger, puffier skirts and outfits, dress outfits, to keep them from really getting squished down or wrinkled. And it really just adds extra blanket to your lower half when you're out in blistering winter cold. And this wonderful Scottish wool definitely keeps the wind out, so I'm really thrilled that I picked this particular blanket to turn into a fabulous coat. I also did use a faux fur on the collar, and I'm so happy because it's like this wonderful fluffy scarf up around my neck. I'm really considering maybe doing a little bit of rings of that fluffy faux fur around the wrists as well to make them extra puffy and warm as well. Overall, very pleased with this Butterick pattern. A few alterations that needed to be made, but luckily they were pretty darn simple, and I think I would definitely consider doing this one again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope maybe it's inspired you to make yourself your own new fabulous 60s or 70s inspired winter coat. If you liked this video or you like sewing videos in general, please hit that like and subscribe button. Ring the bell down below for notifications. We would love to have you here on our journey with us. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.